Hi, and welcome back to another episode of just dissecting the engine of my 1978 Mercedes-Benz 450 SL. Today we have what's going to be probably my favorite episode, where we have the two most complicated parts I have taken off of the engine so far. And they are this piece and another piece that is lying on the floor that you will see soon. This is the lower intake manifold, which, ooh, big fancy words, manifold. What this does, if you remember first episode I did, I had the air cleaner assembly, right? Which was just an air filter in a big black box. And that went into the intake mixture regulator, which was that little weird thing that had a little circle, a little hole down here, and a hole up at the top, and had the little flap in it. Well, that hole at the bottom goes into here. This is the lower intake manifold. And this big, scary, complicated looking piece, all that it does, it has a couple of wires here for various fluids, but all it does is it takes air in here, and it pushes that air out these 8 holes. That's really all it does. And of course, there's this little thing here that you can, here, let me get in, twist that, and that's the throttle. That tells it basically how much air to push through, but that's all it does. So it's very simple, even though it looks complicated. Yeah. And so let me get the second part, the second half of this. And I'll just move this whole thing down here. And you'll notice that I have cardboard on everything. That is, because it is a lot easier to see a lost screw on cardboard than it is to see a lost screw on asphalt. And B, because it protects the tables from dripping oil. So this is the second part. And you'll have to forgive me, it's very dirty. It was like this when I got it. But what this does with all of its little nuts and bolts is also very simple. If you remember in a previous episode, I showed you these 8 holes on the car. These 4, and the same 4 on this side. All that this does, if you remember the 8 holes from the piece that I just put down in the ground, those 8 holes are mirrored on the bottom side of this. So air comes up through here, up through these 8 holes. Say there's one that comes in the bottom here, and it follows this tube, and it routes along this tube into here, into this hole, and this hole, let's see, it's this, so it's the back second from the right. That hole puts air into here. That's all that it does. So again, much like the piece that I just showed you and I just put back on the ground, this piece is a very complicated, heavy chunk of metal that does one very simple task, which is just take air from one point and put it into another point. Takes these 8 holes at the bottom and puts it out the 8 holes on the sides, which you can actually kind of see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another 4 on the other side. It's really all it does. Now you're probably wondering what these things up here do. This is a little electrical thing that isn't related to it. It's just put on here because that was a convenient place for the engineers to put it. It does other things in the engine. This is the starter regulator, if I remember correctly. And all it does is it puts in like the right amount of whatever for the engine to actually start just the first time before other systems in the car take over. And then this little hole right here, which I'm not sure you can see, this hole, you'll see there's some greenness around it. That's corrosion due to coolant. And all that is this is a hole that brings in coolant that keeps this whole thing cool. Because this is it's solid metal, which gets very hot, and it's very close to the actual combustion area of the engine. So this thing gets very hot and you need coolant in there to make sure it doesn't melt. Yeah, so that's what this whole assembly does. These two pieces, that piece and that piece. Those 8 holes there go into the bottom of this one, and these 8 holes here go into the 2 sides of the engine. That's it. It's very simple.